Hello there, biology boys and girls, and welcome to our last video lesson for Unit 2, the unit that's all about ecology. We are going to look at populations and population dynamics here in Lesson 6, our 6th video for this unit. Wow, okay. The topics that we're going to cover in this video, it's everything over populations, okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is define a population, all right. We're then going to examine 3 key traits to help us further describe populations, individual populations. All right. We're going to look at how populations grow. And we'll look at that by examining 2 models of population growth, the exponential model and the logistic model. And last but not least, we are going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the 2 types of populations that we can generally study in a unit over ecology, or in the field of ecology. Okay, topic 1, the definition of a population. A population consists of all individuals of a species that live in a same or certain area roughly at the same time. This definition allows for scientists to apply the similar thinking between a population of humans and a population of E. coli bacteria that may be living in your stomach, okay, or a population of deer here in northeast Kansas. Alrighty. The definition of a population, simply put, the same species of individuals living in the same area at the same time. Having a firm understanding of what a population is, which we've seen before, okay, and let's just a little review for you. Let's get into the 3 key features or traits of a population if we were to describe a population and compare it and contrast it to a different one. The first thing is population size. Exactly how big is the population? This can say a lot about a population from the get-go. If it's a small population, odds are those animals do not reproduce very often, and they might in turn be at a little bit of an environmental and or ecological disadvantage. Maybe they're not necessarily fit for survival. You get a few traits that are not very ideal, and all of a sudden that smaller population can quickly vanish. Small populations are also at a greater disadvantage compared to larger, more abundant populations because natural disasters, fire, flood, tornadoes, okay, drought, those types of events can harm a smaller population much greater than they can a larger population. So population size tells us a lot about that population, hence towards some basic knowledge about that population size. The next key factor is population density. So key factor 2 here when describing a population, density. How many of those individuals of that population are actually in that area? Lower population's density occasionally leads to maybe a healthier population, whereas larger population density can lead to a maybe not as healthy population. Case in point, disease. Alrighty, disease. If you have a smaller, more spread out population, okay, I guess it doesn't have to be smaller to be more spread out, but if the density is lower, disease cannot necessarily travel from individual to individual as readily or as rapidly, whereas a larger population, disease can spread like wildfire, as some of them say. Okay, so density can hint a lot towards a description of a population and helping you better understand it as well. The last of the 3 key factors is dispersion, or how those individuals are spread out amongst the area at which their population is inhabiting. There are 3 types of dispersion. There's random dispersion, which means the individuals of that population really have no rhyme or reason to why they are where they are. There's also even distribution, where they typically have a set area at which they are in, and other organisms in that population are roughly the same distance away from them as they are from others. And then there's clumped distribution. Okay? Clump distribution would kind of be like your animals that move in herds or flocks. So 3 types of dispersion patterns that can speak greatly towards understanding a population if you're looking to describe it. Okay? Random distribution, even distribution, and clumped distribution. The 3 types of ways, the 3 ways that animals can be dispersed amongst the area at which they are inhabiting. As we've talked about before in some of our other areas of science, we like to use models to help us infer and explain and better understand naturally occurring phenomenon. We use models when studying populations as well. And I didn't mention it earlier, but the study of populations is demography. If you study a population or study the individuals in it, you are a demographer. So demographers, or the art of demography, science of demography, because it's not an art, it's a science, okay, uses population models, theoretical constructions, assisting us to try to explain how an actual real-life population would grow and act and behave. Two major types of models that we're going to look at: an exponential model and a logistic model, and each one talks about how populations will grow, or their growth rate, which is the amount of births minus deaths. Okay, that's what a growth rate is. Alrighty? In an exponential growth curve or an exponential growth model, the population is increasing at a steady rate. Okay, it's staying at a rate of growth that is the same, therefore it steadily and rapidly can increase. We see this with some smaller organisms. We'll talk about that a little bit in class. Okay, microorganisms in particular. Every now and then, though, we hit an area at which the population can no longer be supported by its environment and the resources in that environment, and we call that a carrying capacity. It's pretty much the maximum amount of individuals that can be inhabited in that area, so the max size of population for that organism. Another type of growth model we look at is the logistic model. And the logistic model factors in the carrying capacity. It's where we have steady, rapid growth until we eventually reach that limiting point, that carrying capacity mark, and we level off. The organisms are able to maintain themselves and not fall completely back down and become extinct or vanish, but they can manage themselves. All right, and they can linger right along that carrying capacity in that environment and still use the resources effectively and efficiently without completely exhausting them. That's what I'm looking for. Long pause. Exhausting their resources. When looking at each one of these models, we take into account two major groups of factors that can affect the growth rate in either an exponential model or a logistic model. We have density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. A density-dependent factor is exactly what the term states. It's a limiting factor that can adjust a population due to its density or have a greater or lesser impact on that population due to its density. Such factors that are density-dependent would be things such as food or water. Resources that become really limited when you get a large amount of organisms in that small area. So the density increases. That's really going to have a strong influence on the health status of that population. Okay? If it's a lower density, then that density-dependent factor isn't going to have as great of an influence on the population characteristics or the status of that population. The other type of factor that we look at is a density-independent factor, which means it doesn't matter how dense or how congested or how sparse that population is in that certain area. This factor is going to have the same effect on it regardless. Okay? These are really known as environmental conditions. So things like a density-independent factor would be like a hurricane or a flood or a drought or a wildfire or a tornado. Okay, we're talking about nasty stuff that whether you're a really large dense population or a really large not very dense population or a very small very dense population, that density independent factor is pretty much going to be pretty harmful to your overall status and health status as a population. Okay, our final topic for the video deals with the two types of populations that we're going to analyze. Okay. One of them is known as K strategist, and the other one is known as R strategist. The way I try to remember them is R for rapidly reproducing, and K for not being R, which means it's not rapidly reproducing. Okay? R strategists are species that grow exponentially when the environmental conditions allow for it. So you're talking some populations of insects, several populations of plants, okay? Even some small, higher level organisms, such as mammals, okay, reptiles, birds, all right, if they're smaller, okay? So you're looking at large litters, okay, large amounts of offspring in a short amount of time with short life cycles. Okay, so everything's either really large and abundant or really short in duration. Okay, that's kind of an R strategist. R strategist would be greatly harmed by density independent factors. Alrighty, anything that's environmental in terms of conditions or factors, that would play a great role in kind of determining the overall success of that population. Whereas with K strategists, we're looking at organisms that are typically pretty large, all right, much larger in terms of just general overall size, have fewer offspring per reproduction cycle, but provide greater parental care, ensuring that offspring has a better chance to survive and grow up to be able to reproduce as well. Okay, and they can withstand some of those density independent factors, some of those environmental factors like hurricane, flood, fire, tornado, etc. All right, they've been equipped with some necessary traits to allow them to combat unfavorable environmental conditions. Okay, that does it for this video over populations. I know some of the content was a little broad, but make sure that you check out the reading. The reading is pages 320 through 325 in your textbook. It will go into a little bit more detail. Okay, and we'll also do some practice inside of the classroom. All right, as always, if you have any questions over the video content, definition of a population, the key traits that help us to describe a population, the two types of population growth models, exponential, logistic, and the factors that can affect population growth, density independent, density dependent factors, and then the two types of populations that we study, R or K strategists. By all means, come and ask me. Okay, see you guys in class.